Right, welcome back to Agritalk right here on KTN Farmers TV. Thank you for still staying with us. Today we are talking about millet farming, and with me is Dr. Harish Gandhi, who is a principal scientist. He's also the breeding lead dryland crops, also the global breeding lead dryland cereals at CIMMYT. Also joined by another guest, who is also Dr. Mark Nas, who is a plant breeder, and he's also a senior sorghum and millet scientist at CIMMYT. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen, and sticking with us.
Thank you
All
for
right.
having us.
Pleasure. So 2023 is the year of the millet. Dr. Harish, let's start with you. When you talk about year of the millet, what do we exactly mean?
Well, I think it's if you look at the United Nations organization FAO, they always have a specific year declared for certain things. So they had in the past the year of legumes or pulses. So in 2023 they have declared a year as a year of millets. I think it's really to give the focus some of these commodities, some of these crops need. It's really to promote their benefits. It's really to bring focus back onto these crops, which may have been forgotten. So I think it's for me, as a scientist who has been working on the crop breeding and the research, this is one of the wonderful things which could have happened to the millet, because it's always hard to have a conversation about millets, and when you have an international body like FAO says this is the International Year of Millet, and thanks to the countries who have supported it to become International Year of Millet, I think this is a great thing because it brought a lot of focus. I'm having conversation with you to talk about millets. And now more people are getting aware of millet. So I think the whole idea is just to create a lot of awareness about millet, and I think they are, they're traditional, but they're rich in the nutrition, as we talked about earlier. So I think it's to me I feel quite excited about it.
Right, Dr. Mark, he's excited about the year of the millet.
Oh, yeah.
You, as a crop scientist for sorghum and millet, when we focus on millet, the way he said the years have been going where you have different crops. Now this year we have the millet.
Yep.
So what does this mean from where you sit?
The relevance that is being given to millet means that we'll have more visibility to not just to the farmers,
Yes.
most importantly to the farmers, but also to the people who are making the decisions on the direction of the research, direction of plant breeding. So, for example, within the CG system, CIMMYT was tasked to work on these crops. And CIMMYT, as we know, is traditionally a maize and wheat research institute. But now we are moving towards working on these cropping systems, which also involves dryland crops. And recently we just launched the 2030 CIMMYT strategy, which involves the dryland crops as a full program within the institute. So for me as a plant breeder, as a scientist, this will give me and the impact that I'm hoping to do in Africa. This will give it more visibility and definitely more more connections and more networking with our partners across the region.
All right, so CIMMYT, anything else that you can add that CIMMYT is doing in order to embrace the year of the millet?
Yes, I think we're doing a lot of activities. So first of all, what we are trying to do is also raise the awareness about millets to our traditional audience. As Mark said, we are maize and wheat organization. So our colleagues who we have traditionally been working with are maize and wheat colleagues. So it's an opportunity for us to raise awareness about millets in that community.
Yes.
So that has been something we are doing. So for example, we'll be doing a webinar series on the International Year of Millets. So we'll be bringing colleagues who have done a research on millets or who have been using millets in their food processing or they have been doing research on, let's say, how do we make different products, from millets. So we're bringing these colleagues on a webinar fashion. We are also hoping to organize another event towards the end of the year in Nairobi. We are still in the planning phase to see, what are, a lot of institutions are doing different activities on the millet. So we are trying to see, where does our work we do adds value to what is already happening in this space, and where are the gaps are. So I think we have been taking several initiatives internally, especially in Kenya. We are talking to different scientists. We are planning on talking to different farmer organizations, and see, what are their challenges are when they grow millet. So I think we should use this as an opportunity to raise the awareness, but also raise the typical challenges which are faced by the farmers, by the researchers, by the different value chain actors. So that way, we're able to move somewhat in the direction of solving those issues, and also changing the environment so that the millet become a mainstream back again.
Yeah.
Right, Mark. He has spoken about. You are also speaking about the partnerships that you
Yes.
have. You can even just mention to us the partnerships that you have and what you are even planning. Even are you planning
Sure.
to expand the partnerships to other
Yeah.
areas?
So let me start by talking about the traditional way that the research on these crops has been done before. So typically each country in Africa would have their own programs, breeding programs, deployment programs. But what we are doing differently now is to bring these countries together, including Kenya. And in fact, Kenya is one of the what we call a key crucial country that will contribute to the network. So we have this network of countries in Eastern and Southern Africa, and there's another network in the Western and Central Africa. But so for Eastern and Southern Africa, we're bringing together stakeholders of the value chain. So for each country, we have, as I think I mentioned before, what we call a product design team. So this team will guide the direction of what we want a millet would look like. So that's why it's a product design team.
Yes.
It's like in engineering, right? You have a blueprint for, so a millet should be high yielding, resistant to some pests and diseases. So the product design team coming from, say, we have a farmer. We have farmers as members of this product design team. So right from the beginning, the farmers, the processors, these guys that are not traditionally involved in designing a product, they are now part of that team to tell us breeders that, hey, guys, this is what we want for a millet that we want to be released in the future.
Yes.
So I think this is the best way to do plant breeding.
Right, very well said. Let's now move to another issue, food security. Because someone will ask, okay, so why are we planting millet? Why is it a year of the millet? Let's look at food security, because this is also a very critical issue. And how does millet now come in to help even push the agenda of food security? So let's start with you, Harish.
Yeah, so let's, in the food security and nutritional security, let's talk about, I would suggest both things.
Yes.
Because what happens is, traditionally we have been focused so much on the calories and less on the nutrition.
Yes.
So, and I think there is what we use a term, my colleagues from socioeconomics, they call them hidden hunger, which means you might be getting enough calories, but you may not be getting enough nutrition. Okay. So I think millets are quite critical in reducing that hidden hunger. And because of what Mark mentioned earlier, the nutritional minerals the millets have, and other ingredients, the dietary fiber and everything else a millet has. So that's one aspect in terms of nutrition. In terms of food security, we are already experiencing climate change all over the world.
Yes.
It's not something like it's a distant possibility anymore, right? What we need now as citizens and as a policymakers, as a scientists, is solutions which allow us to mitigate or adapt to climate change, right? So the millet is an important ingredient there, important options there because of the resilience this crop has. So in terms of food security, my take is the millet will be such a critical crop because of what's happening with our climate, because of what's happening to our environment, and so they will provide a very critical solution and very critical option for a farmer, for a consumer, in general, to make sure there is enough food security and also nutritional security because of the properties of what millet has.
All right, Mark, on food security, what he's spoken about. When you look at it from your side, what sets what sets millet apart to make it very important when it comes to food, for the nutrition and also the food security?
Yeah. So there are very specific areas where millets are really grown. So farmers would typically, as I mentioned earlier, get really very low yields on this. So when we localize the efforts on these crops, and we target those communities that are really growing millets,
Yes.
and increase their yields, then we can address on a local level the food security. Yeah, and Arish was also mentioning, of course, there's nutrition security.
Yes.
And diverse diets for these communities. Yeah.
All right, let's look at the East African region and look at and how this crop is embraced. First of all, in East Africa, our neighboring countries, is millet there more grown than what we have in the country? When you look at the East African region.
Yep. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. Kenya is relatively less area for millets than Tanzania, and I think Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Uganda and Kenya are about at par. Yeah, and what else? Sudan and Ethiopia really high. I think million hectares for both of these countries.
So I think if you look at the millet and sorghum together, I would say in general, Kenya is not at par with our neighboring countries, Uganda, Tanzania, Sudan, Ethiopia. So I would say I think there is but there is a potential, as we have been talking about.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot to do.
Yes.
For all of us. Yeah.
All right. Now, let's look at the way, Harish, you are speaking about these areas where millet can do very well, especially the arid and semi-arid areas. And we know the communities in these areas are usually pastoralist communities. They thrive in livestock. Now, turning these communities and telling them, okay, millet is the way to go. How can we do this? And how do you convince such a community? They've always been pastoralists. Now, millet is also another way that they can also help themselves. So how do you do this?
I would start with demonstrating, how to grow millet in those areas, because I think also as a researcher, for us, it's important to know what are the local conditions are. So what I would do is I would take some of the released varieties, let's say by Calro, and test them in those environments, grow them, and do a demonstration showing is more valuable than just telling, right? So if you do a demonstration and make them part of a decision making, right? Which is okay. I mean, you have 4 or 5 options of, let's say, the millet varieties. They can say, this is more suitable for us, because they are also looking from their perspective what is needed in their areas. And I think and also helping them see how this creates a value for them, right? So as you said, they are pastoralists, they have livestock, and I mentioned earlier the millets produces this fodder, which could be valuable for them in the days of the year when there is no fodder available, right? Because when you drive around, you see that there is a huge market of the haze in the country.
Yes.
So that's a potential. So if you show them there are different value additions it can bring to their current lifestyle, I'm certainly, I mean, everybody's making a rational decisions, right? I mean, more often, and so I think it's our job as to show them, and actually also learn from them that what they really need, and also show them through the demonstration that how it can bring the value to their current lifestyle.
Mark, how do we change the mindset of such communities that millet can also be a way of livelihood aside from the livestock that they have?
Yeah, I think millets are already a way of livelihood, but only a small percent. It's still a way of subsistence.
Yes.
What we say, as I mentioned, it's about uh, a great majority of millets are consumed by the household. So it's essentially subsistence farming, and a very small amount would go to the processors for flour. So I would say it's not just changing the mindset; it's actually increasing the production.
Yes.
So once you have surplus, the farmers can earn.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, and also let's move on. And even as we've spoken about the other communities and how to just embrace millet farming, let's also come to even other Kenyans. Traditionally, this is a crop that is used for porridge. It's used in the rural areas most of the time for porridge. How do you convince the person in the rural area that millet can also be used to make other things that are not even porridge, so that they can create a livelihood for themselves?
Well, I would say rural areas, the traditionally, people in the rural areas already know several traditional uses of millets,
Yes.
right? I would say it's the the people like us in urban areas who needs to be convinced more about using millets in their daily diets. Um, I think in terms of the processing, we can potentially bring in the knowledge which is available from other countries.
Yes.
Let's say, in Western Africa, how some of these commodities are used, and we can share that information, promote that information through different channels with the local communities, so that they can see how does it fit into their own, food, traditional food, and the habits they have. But I would say also the urban areas, needs to take the lead
Yes.
in using millets in their food a lot more.
All right. Now to another issue. We are in the technology world. Everything is moving to digital. When you look at the research from millet production, are we expecting to see any technological advancements, any innovations from this that can help this move forward?
When we develop the products, we mean the seed that the farmers plant. So this is where plant breeding comes in. As also a scientist, this is what we do. So we essentially the objective is really to get better varieties to the farmers and get get them these varieties quicker. So that's also one mitigation for climate change, because as I mentioned, the pearl millet released in Kenya was in 2000, early 2000. So it means the climate has probably changed already, and it could have been more adapted in 2000 rather than in 2023.
Yes.
So we have to really release varieties quickly, so that what has been researched now is being used by farmers not 20 years after. It should be immediately. So that's what we do. So we do faster breeding, faster product development. We use all the tools of genomics available to CIMMYT. We have all the expertise of CIMMYT and the collaborators at our disposal to achieve these things.
Mark talked about the product development innovations which are happening, and there are tremendous innovations which are happening. So, for example, if I have a new seed variety, how does it reach in the hands of the farmer, right? So there are innovations also happening in that side, such as digital tools, promotion of such information with the farmers. We talked about demonstration. Um, so I think the way, if you look at the science is happening in the area we work in, but science is also happening in the other areas. So there's always new technological innovations which are happening in other areas, which we can assimilate basically. So for I mean, the in terms of the computer science and ITs, a lot of things have happened, and we can actually use them to, for example, find where are the best areas to grow millets in Kenya, right? And so we can target better. We can say where is the variety. Let's say the Calro and the Mark team working on together is best suited using some of this digital and artificial intelligence and other areas as well. So I think there's a lot happening, and I think, as Mark said, we through this network we are creating of a various national program, our institution like CIMMYT and the other institutions, we can bring all the expertise together, and they're available. We just need to ask the question, what are we trying to do, and then it will all come through. So I would say we are not behind in using technologies for millets. I think what we need is I mean, typically what they say is, if you have a hammer, you look for the nail.
Yes.
But I don't think that's the way to do it. What we need is a problem statement first, and then you look for the hammer, right? So I think that's what we need to be really good at.
Yes.
And so there's some of the things we're doing on product design team side, making sure we're producing the right products, and making sure that there's adoption of those products is quite sort of a foundational and underlying, for whatever we do.
All right. Finally, gentlemen, let us look at the future of millet production from where you sit. What are we looking at in terms of millet production in the coming years, in the coming months?
I would say the millet production will increase overall. I believe the International Year of Millet has created quite a bit of momentum, around millet. I hope that doesn't die down. I hope it will be followed through by various countries, organizations who are taking part in here. Hopefully, there will be going forward at least a week of millet every year, where we can bring the awareness about millets every year and make sure we are not losing the track.
Yes.
I think the millet production will increase because a lot of things are also happening on the food science side, food technology side, processing side. And as Mark said, a lot of research is also happening on the plant breeding side. So we'll target the better varieties. And we talked about just now about other technologies which are also coming in play. So I would say there's a bright future for millet going forward, as long as colleagues and people are working together.
Yes. And Mark, finally?
Yeah, and there's also a demand and probably a mission for us to increase the productivity of these crops. I've seen this, I think, a million times, the projection of these cereal crops that we have to produce, I think, 2.5 times more than what we are producing today for 2050 or in the future. So there is a mission for us to do these things, and I'm confident that with the partnerships we have with with the stakeholders, specifically in Kenya, we have Calro and Kefis and many other universities with us. So this is not just CIMMYT; it's a whole array of experts. I think it's good to see these scientists and farmers and stakeholders come together to solve this problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. 2023, the year of the millet. Now we've been speaking to Dr. Harish and Dr. Mark from CIMMYT. They are scientists in crop, in the seed itself, sorghum, millet. They're also in charge of breeding, cereal breeding at CIMMYT. They've been speaking about millet farming. If you are at home and you'd want to start this and you'd want to even get into it, maybe you had stopped a bit, but you want to get back. I believe you've gotten some ideas on what you need to do. Right, that's it from us. My name is Calvin Nyakundi, and this is AgriTalk right here on KTN Farmers TV.